6 time zones east of Dallas. So that in our case, that would be Europe. And that's further evidence of what's going on. Now, it's also important that you understand that this unofficial database is connected intimately with all of these. And we already know that there is a bug in part of the Seidel system, malware, that allows it to capture all of the credentials of everyone who is reporting into it. So that means now with those credentials, you can change things here or here and backload them here, so that it's not the votes that come from this direction, it's the change votes that can come from this direction. So, and the idea that then there's this official database that sends things to your Secretary of State, there is an official database, but since it is behind the same firewall, it doesn't really matter. You can go from the unofficial to the official. In our investigation, right there, in our investigation, we found ways to change your votes there at the voting place. We found ways to change the tabulation software itself. I'm going to show you an example of that in Kentucky in a minute. We found ways to change the database itself. We found ways to go into both of these and change the software that they have that again gets loaded into the equipment here that goes to the equipment here and rig a vote. We found ways that we could get in and change that database. We could change that database. It's a mess. So what did we see that was strongly suggested in Dallas in 2018? Well, we had people that we know that are extremely credible people, and they wanted to tell us that they had seen NGP Van playing in these databases. Now, who is NGP Van? Well, NGP Van is the voter analytics company for the Democrat Party. It's kind of like what Cambridge Analytica was in 2016. The difference is Cambridge Analytica got pilloried, NGP Van got ignored. But what any voter analytics company does is they look at a history of primaries and they draw relationships between early voting and election day in the primary for a particular party. Then they look at the results in the following general election, both in early voting and in election day. And what they're really trying to do is make algorithms that, based on historical evidence of what happens here and here, and then tracking what happens here in real time during early voting, you can project what's going to happen in the way of voting on election day. And one of the byproducts, of course, is that it will tell you at the end of early voting how many early votes would need to be added or subtracted in order, according to your projection, for you to win on election day. That gets pretty important, particularly in what we've seen in the last 48 hours here in the United States. So what happened in Dallas? Well, the votes from the precincts were sent by a flash memory card to the central tabulation servers in Dallas. And then these 4 players got involved. That's what we saw on the previous slide. We saw that you have an operator at the county level, and that is being constantly updating Clarity, which is also updating Seidel and their clouds. And in the case of Dallas in 2018, this operator had his own laptop. He was bringing it in and out of the tabulation room all the time during early voting and election day. And in one case was seen taking a thumb drive out of his laptop and plugging it in here. There are wireless connections here and there are wireless connections here so that the unofficial database can transmit. One of the things that bothered us was the timestamp mismatch error that we saw thousands of times in the logs in Dallas. And that can be generated a couple of different ways. But one of the things that happened was we saw NGP Van interacting with this stream. Now, we can understand why this arrow exists. because they want to get the early votes and upload them every single day so that they can upload and change their election day forecast. The problem is this end of the arrow. What was NGP Van doing putting things into the stream as opposed to simply taking things out of the stream? Things that went into the stream would generate a timestamp mismatch error. Don't know if that's what it was, but we can tell you it's in the logs. And of course, all of this stuff, as we said earlier, is stored, controlled, and reported by a Barcelona company, Seidel, which has its servers in Frankfurt. Why in the world is the U.S. election storing 28 of its states' votes on a server in Frankfurt operated by a company that we don't even know who's the owner? Let me show you that Seidel vulnerability we talked about. That's the vulnerability. I'll show you why that, well, the reason that that vulnerability is really important is because, just a second, let me get back there. Because if you can get in here and you can see all the votes, you can change them, and this vulnerability I'm going to show you allows you to get all the passwords and usernames to backload it into counties if you wanted to change it later. So let me show you that vulnerability just so you know what's going on here. The malware is called QSnatch, and it's already inside Seidel at an area called Seidel staging. That in the blue is the indicator that QSnatch is there and operating. So what does it do? Well, QSnatch is what's called a CGI password logger. And basically between that and the credentials scraper, it allows them to not only get credentials for all of these counties, but to be able to log in. It has what's called a backdoor, and basically that means that it can execute arbitrary code on a device if it wants to. It can exfiltrate, in other words, it can take files out of the system and send it back to their infrastructure so they can see what's happening. It has web shell functionality for remote access so they can get in. And it has a very interesting persistence and mitigation capability such that when a patch to fix your system that may be infected with QSnatch is generated, QSnatch itself redirects that patch elsewhere, and it continues to be live in your system. The only way to get rid of QSnatch is to do a full factory reset on the device prior to trying to do a firmware update to stop it. We haven't seen any of that happen on Seidel. If you'd like further proof, you can actually prove to yourself that Seidel's servers are in Frankfurt, Germany. If you go in and plug that Seidel.com in using NSLookup or host, you'll find that URL address 52, 57, etc. You can do an NSLookup and see that it's going out to the EU, or you can do a GeoIP lookup and you'll see that that server is at Frankfurt in Germany. We won't worry about that. So let's look at some actual proof of hacking in action. We were called in to look at Kentucky because of the results. The results in Kentucky were amazing. Every Republican at the top of the ticket won big. There were 1,428,000 votes cast, and every Republican won by a margin of 200,000 to 300,000 votes, except for the governor, Matt Bevin. And he loses by 5,000 votes. Now, This may sound familiar to you, and it is, because if you will recall, on election night, our current president was ahead in 5 key battleground states that have Democrat governors, and he was ahead comfortably in all of them. And suddenly all 5 states quit counting at the same time and went offline for 3 hours. And when they came online, suddenly massive numbers of votes. In the case of 3 states, every single vote that was suddenly found in those 3 hours was for one candidate and one candidate only. Absolutely impossible. So this result looked really bad to everybody, and we went up there and we started doing an investigation. And the first thing we said was, now you realize your votes are with Clarity and they're being stored overseas. And they said, no, they're not. And we said, well, yeah, actually they are. Bring up the Kentucky State Board of Elections website on your computer, please. So they did. And we said, click on that link for the unofficial votes. And they did. And when they did, I said, look at that bar at the top of your screen. What's it say? They said, well, Clarity Elections. We said, yeah, you look like you're on the Kentucky State Board of Elections, but this site is Clarity. And they went, wow. And then I said, scroll down to the bottom. Who owns that page? Seidel. And that's when the discussion started. Now, this is some amazing video that you're seeing from CNN election night. And I want to go back and show you a little bit about this clip. First, I want to explain what's happening in this clip. What's happening in this clip is this is the live feed from Clarity Elections coming through the Associated Desk or Decision Desk HQ. So this is the live feed. You're seeing the database that Clarity has as it gets updated with votes, okay? And right now, oh, and this little ribbon at the bottom, this is generated by CNN. And they update this a second after they get the update from Clarity up here. So let's just look. Right now, Andy Beshear, who is the guy that upset Matt Bevin, the governor at the time, Andy Beshear has 673,948 votes. That ties to what the ribbon from CNN says. Same thing with Matt Bevin, 662,235. 662,235. Now, let me take you through, and real quick, I'm going to run it again. You're going to see, if you're watching just this gold, you're going to see a flash update, and then this guy's face fills the page, and then I'm going to show you what you really missed. So here we go. Watch the gold. The update's coming. Boom, there it updates, and now here's this guy. Now let me show you what you missed. We're going to drag this back frame by frame. And so here we are before the update, and now I'm going to start walking you forward. Watch the gold. Here comes the update from Clarity. Boom. There it is. So now the update, Andy Beshear has 674,508 votes. And look down below, Andy Beshear had 673,948. They haven't had a chance to update the ribbon because this is in split seconds we're looking now. So Andy Beshear has just gained 560 votes. That makes sense. That's what happens as more votes come in, right? Let's look at Matt Bevin. He now has 661,675. But look down below. He did have 662,235 at the exact same second that Andy Beshear has gone up 560 votes. Matt Bevin has gone down 560 votes. This is vote switching in the computer. And by the way, between the 560 gain and 560 loss, you have just seen 25% of the loss amount of this race happen in front of your very eyes.